When the first rays of sun break through in the morning, nighttime is quickly over, for the light of the sun is stronger than darkness. In Germany alone, with about 80 million inhabitants, there are more than 260,000 mobile communication transmitters, over 100 million cell phones, and more than 50 million decked cordless phones. The antennas are omnipresent, and there are hardly any places left that are not reached by the pulsed, high-frequency radiation. Research findings and observations of the environment make it more and more clear that pulsed, high-frequency radiation causes serious health damage.
I cordially welcome you to our documentary, Mobile Communication, The Hidden Danger. In this documentary, we are going to introduce you step by step to a line of argument everybody can understand. Take the questions we've highlighted in red for you as a helpful guide. This way, step by step, we'll bring to light the hidden dangers of this technology. By way of the 26th Ordinance of the Federal Emission Control Act, the population should be protected against these hazards by determination of thresholds. In Part 1 of our documentary, we will clarify, do these thresholds provide real protection?
The radiation found in nature without mobile communications is 1/100,000th of a microwatt per square meter. The threshold for the UMTS radio networks in Germany was set at 10 million microwatts per square meter.
Already at this point, we have to stop and ask the question, can this be a good thing when a value which nature predetermined is raised by humans by a trillion-fold and then declared harmless? Is nature that dumb, or is man so intelligent?
How did this threshold come about, and who set it?
We're here in Munich, Germany, in front of the ICNIRP headquarters. ICNIRP is short for International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection. Here in this building in Munich, Germany, this private club decides on and proposes radiation thresholds for the whole world. What kind of an important club is this? The members of this committee are not designated by election or by government, they appoint their members themselves. Usually these persons have an important position in the industry. I'll quote Professor Bernhard here, the chairman of the ICNIRP. Quote, "If we reduce the official thresholds, we will ruin the economy and the location Germany is endangered." Unquote. But how do independent experts judge these specifications set by the ICNIRP? Professor Dr. Neil Cherry, an acknowledged expert in this field, investigated these ICNIRP standards as Commissioner for the Government of New Zealand. He came to the conclusion that these standards are seriously faulty, an example of biased opinion and intentional misrepresentation.
In spite of reputable scientists having major concerns, the German government and the World Health Organization adopted the propositions of this industry-oriented committee. The definition of thresholds for the entire world goes back to this one industry-oriented committee. Here are the roots. Whose interests are probably being represented by this private organization? Were the members of this private club only and exclusively concerned about the well-being and health of humans?
What does this threshold mean? What is it based on?
Here a quote from Professor Bernhardt. "We have understood beyond doubt only the thermal effect of radio waves, and we can currently set thresholds only on this basis. Beyond this, though, there are indications on carcinogenic effects and disturbances of the cell membrane."
We'll examine Professor Bernhardt's statement by means of an illustration. He says, in other words, we have understood beyond doubt the physics. He mentions the heat, but we don't know how much about the biology and chemistry involved. That is why we have to hide the biological and chemical side of this. This little comic illustrates the behavior of this committee excellently.
During a school field trip, the student asks his physics teacher,
"Is this kind of toadstool dangerous?"
Is it dangerous if I throw a stone at your head from a distance of 1 meter?
Oh. Yes.
Is it also dangerous when I do the same with a toadstool?
No. No.
The student is relieved. According to the laws of physics, this kind of mushroom is not dangerous. The physics teacher cannot explain why the student gets sick after eating the mushroom.
What? Impossible.
The basis for this threshold measurement is the assumption that there are only heat-related effects caused by mobile phone radiation, i.e., physical processes. The threshold relates to a lifeless body and in no way takes into consideration the biological effects in our living bodies. Any type of effects that are not heat-related are vehemently denied. Otherwise, the legal thresholds would be deprived of any scientific foundation.
Here's a definition of the threshold. The legal threshold is based on the radiation intensity, which heats up a lifeless body for 30 minutes by 1 degree Celsius. Long-term impacts of more than 30 minutes remain disregarded.
So this threshold protects dead matter from warming up for a period of 30 minutes.
We are a living organism. We are being irradiated nearly 24 hours a day, even from before birth. In our body, countless complicated biological processes are taking place.
Even the ICNIRP committee has to admit in its guidelines that the threshold protects only against short-term, immediate health-related effects by increased tissue temperatures. However, all experts agree that there is no thermal risk coming from Wi-Fi. The thresholds claim to protect against something that in the end does not pose a hazard at all, and so they are a malicious deception for the population. When setting the thresholds, the non-thermal, biological effects were not taken into consideration. For instance, effects on nerves or hormones were totally suppressed.
And if someone would measure the level of radioactive radiation with a thermometer instead of a Geiger counter, and based on this thermal measurement rate the radioactivity as harmless, he would be declared crazy. But in the case of protection against mobile radiation, we are selling this as a science.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have shown that the valid thresholds are irresponsible. This is confirmed also by the Scientific Directorate of the European Parliament, STOA. Quote, "The public concern is not unfounded. At places with a long-term exposure, radiation should not exceed 100 microwatts per square meter."
Were our scientists and experts mistaken by 5 to the 10th power when they set the limits in Germany? In this case, we're facing a cell phone radiation worst-case scenario.
Counter voices from reputable scientists confirm this fear. Professor Folger, Technical College Aachen, said already in 2001, quote, "The allegation of a protective effect of the thresholds must be considered as a scientific misinformation. This meets all the legal attributes of fraud, including grossly negligent and intentional endangerment and personal injury." End quote. In a second step of our documentary, we want to now clarify whether there are biological effects caused by mobile radiation.
Already in 1992, the Radiation Protection Commission wrote in the Federal Gazette No. 43 from March 3, 1992, about special effects that are not based on warming. The membrane effects and cell damage have been confirmed many times so that their existence is now considered proven. If these effects were considered certain at that time, why were they ignored in the threshold definitions?
We are now going to examine some independent scientific studies to demonstrate the presence of significant biological effects for our health.
Let's begin with the so-called Salford study. In this study by a Swedish scientist, 3 groups of 8 rats each were exposed to radiation over a period of only 2 hours in a total of 1,000 experiments using a mobile phone with different power levels. Through this radiation, the blood-brain barrier opened. This barrier prevents toxic substances from entering our brain. The damage caused by this is irreversible. The evidence reliability is 99.8%.
Let us look at another investigation which shows that the electromagnetic microwave radiation caused by mobile communication causes a biological effect on our body. It concerns our blood. How red blood cells react to the radiation is shown by the so-called rouleau formation.
Hello, my name is Herbert Jung. I have been an alternative practitioner, a homeopathic practitioner for 20 years. In my work, I have noticed that there are more and more hindrances to recovery from illnesses caused by mobile communications. And also more and more diseases, such as strokes or hyperactivity in children, or that the various disease patterns arise, or hypertension, high blood pressure, only by mobile communications. This was also the reason why I turned to dark field microscopy, because this is, from my point of view, the only method which makes it possible to illustrate how serious the effects of mobile communication are. I am now taking a sample drop of blood from a test person who was or is not exposed to any mobile phone radiation. Here you can see the sample drop of blood we have taken. We are now putting it on a slide and view it under the microscope. We can see how the blood looks. I am now putting blood plate on the microscope. You can now see the vital blood from a patient who has not been exposed to any mobile phone radiation. You can see that the erythrocytes are free, the blood serum can be seen. There are no webs nor follicles in it. So we'll now perform the other test to see what the blood looks like from the same test person after having been exposed to mobile phone usage for 3 minutes.
So I'll turn on the cell phone now.
Now our test person has used the mobile phone for 3 minutes. Now let's see what this has done. We are taking a blood sample to document this. So now we have the blood sample after about 3 minutes of mobile phoning. Let's see what it has caused. So this is now blood from the same test person. Where the blood cells before were nicely separated, you see now how the red blood cells are all bundled together in rouleau formation. Then, of course, the blood can no longer do its job. If this becomes a permanent condition, a thrombus is formed. Depending on the location of the thrombus, if it's in the brain, it will cause a stroke, in the heart, a heart attack, or lung, embolism or thrombosis, wherever. And whether you survive this or you're paralyzed, that's the open question.
Both the Salford study and the images in the dark field microscope prove that there are effects that are not based on heat and that have a negative impact on our health.
There are no long-term studies on the effects of long-term irradiation by transmission masks on the health of the population. Only those of one private physician's initiative in Naila, the so-called Naila study.
We are here in Naila, in Oberfranken, where a group of local physicians carried out a long-term study documenting all the new cancer cases over a period of 10 years. They studied whether people living in a radius of 400 meters around a mobile phone antenna are more often getting cancer than those living in a radius of 400 through 800 meters. The result can be summarized as following. After 5 years, there was no major difference in the two groups concerning new contractions. But in the time frame of 6 through 10 years, the study documented a 300% higher rate of cancer in the inner radius. In addition to this, the people also got cancer there at a much earlier age. So this study showed effectively that contracting cancer due to mobile phone antenna radiation is not immediate but delayed. The results found by the doctors in Naila were confirmed by a study with 2 million people in Belo Horizonte, Brazil.
Numerous other studies could be mentioned here. An international working group of scientists, researchers, and experts in public health policy come to the following conclusion after evaluating more than 2,000 scientific studies. Quote, "The existing thresholds do not provide protection of public health. It is recommended to introduce new biologically based thresholds." End quote.
In summary, the studies cited demonstrate the existence of biological effects which are not caused by the heat of the electromagnetic field, but by its athermal effects.
So now we come to the third step of our documentation and ask the logically consistent question: do these proven biological, athermal effects have a negative impact on our lives?
The building biologist Mace reports complaints are increasing that physical and psychological symptoms such as headache, dizziness, nervous states of exhaustion, tinnitus, hormone, nerve, heart, and sleeping disorders, concentration disorders, attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, irritability, allergies, anxieties, visual disorder, or general malaise occurred immediately after new transmitters had been installed close by or decked cordless telephones had found their way into household or office.
Unfortunately, statistic data published in 2009 and 2010 by Rostad and UNICEF show that there has been a continuous increase in childhood diseases since the year 2000, which with very high probability can be ascribed to the use of mobile phones.
To the alarming facts of this investigation, particularly worrying is the increase of diseases among young people between 15 and 19 years old compared to the year 2000. 1. Disturbances of the central nervous system almost doubled. 2. Blood diseases and disorders of the immune system increased by more than 80%. 3. Neurological disorders increased by more than double. 4. Epileptic disorders increased by 36%.
The claim that mobile phones dumb down is reflected on the increasingly inferior performances of students because the results of mobile phone telephone calls are memory disturbances, lack of concentration, headaches, tinnitus, and similar symptoms. Against the background of the growing electrosmog, we now show you with a case example everyday life at a German school, which certainly is not an isolated case.
Have a seat, Mr. Weiner.
Thank you.
Mr. Weiner, thank you so much for coming to our school as a radiation expert.
It's a pleasure.
Many of our students have concentration problems, often inexplicably perform very poorly, are hyperactive or even depressed. Could this also have to do with radiation?
Yes, definitely. I myself am electrosensitive, and I know because I've been experiencing these symptoms myself, especially for children and adolescents who are still growing. Microwave radiation from mobile phones is even more dangerous. And what is really important about kids using cell phones, I brought an illustration for you. Cell phone radiation penetrates very deep into the brain. Here's a child's head, for example, here a 5-year-old, here a 10-year-old, and here an adult. Huge differences. The biggest danger, though, is that it's all hidden. We don't sense anything, we don't smell it, don't notice anything, don't taste or hear the radiation, nothing noticeable. That's why I thought I'll bring some light into the dark here today. I brought a little measuring instrument with me. With this, I can make the radiation audible, switch it on and, wow, totally in the red area and, well, I'll just be so free. I noticed your cordless telephone here before, your cordless phone on the desk here, so we see already back in the safe green area.
Mr. Weiner, can you make the radiation audible here in our computer room?
Yes, certainly. Do you really think that the students can concentrate in here with this level of radiation? Let's see where it's coming from.
Now upstairs here, Mr. Weiner. What about radiation levels here?
Absolutely clear. The radiation source is over there. Unfortunately, I can't just pull the plug there. You'll have to become active yourself. Complain, write, put pressure on your operators directly and the authorities responsible, because it's absolutely clear, under these circumstances, teaching and learning here cannot be healthy.
The following report from Bavaria confirms that our short film contribution here is not unrealistic. On August 1st, 2007, Spiegel Online reported the Bavarian State Parliament gave the recommendation to dispense with Wi-Fi networks in all Bavarian schools.
In some school admissions applications now, the following passage can even be found. Quote, I furthermore agree that my son or my daughter, in case of admission, will also receive lessons using Wi-Fi. End quote. The fact that the school administration wants to legally secure itself shows how dangerous this technology is. Which school would legally secure itself for the use of an overhead projector?
Even the judicial system now confirms the harmfulness of mobile phones. The higher regional court in Brescia, northern Italy, has now confirmed a causal link with a legally binding verdict. The brain tumor of an employee is due to his business-related hour-long mobile phone and cordless phone telephoning. This verdict is also groundbreaking because the judges excluded industry-financed expert opinions as not credible, and they relied only on sources independent of the industry. In the meantime, the highest Italian court in Rome has confirmed this verdict of the higher regional court, Brescia.
A very extraordinary verdict. What was it founded on?
Yes, it is really an extraordinary verdict, because it is the first of its kind worldwide, where a job-related illness with electromagnetic radiation is documented as the cause. So the court in Brescia recognized and affirmed that there was intensive use of cell and cordless phones in the past 10 years. Because I used cell phone and cordless phones daily, usually for 5 to 6 hours for very long conversations. And I remember that after these long telephoning sessions, my ear was red and sweating, or even the entire left side of my face. This is certainly alarming enough, yet I would like to share even more with you, which the media also reported about. my work colleague, the sales manager, who also used his cell phone as much as I did, he also got the very same cancer. Also, another man from Casamajore, about 30 kilometers away from here, a shop manager, used his cordless phone 8 hours daily, and he too got the exact same tumor. These are the facts.
In the verdict, which he cordially allowed us to look into, a comparison is made between the radiation from an atomic bomb and cellular phones. Can you tell us something about this?
Yes, the verdict refers there to a comparison done by the CTU, which the physician appointed by the court in Brescia documented. This comparison illustrates that mobile communications radiation causes more damage than, for instance, the atomic bomb of Hiroshima. The difference, however, is that the atomic bomb effect had a time limit. Radiation due to mobile communication, in contrast to this, irradiates all of humanity 24 hours a day and 365 days of the year.
Leading experts, scientists, and doctors also confirm the worst fears. Motorola insider Robert C. Kane worked in the telecommunication industry for more than 30 years. He concluded in his book, Cellular Telephone Russian Roulette, quote, "A 2-minute cell phone call alters the user's brainwaves for 1 week. A mobile phone user will not notice any tissue damage unless the scalp, which absorbs only little energy, feels warm. But as the lower-lying brain tissue is not designed to recognize increases in temperature, the tissue damage can already be massive and irreversible by that time." End quote.
Electrical engineer and director of the U.S. Brain Tumor Society, Lloyd Morgan, said in an interview with the magazine Zaldo in 2009, hundreds of thousands of mobile phone users will develop a brain tumor. Cell phones should be prohibited up to the age of 18. The tumor risk for children is significantly higher than for adults.
And one more thing. Everyone can check this himself on the internet, by the way. The French and also the British governments have published recommendations for parents and physicians in which they claim that children up until the age of 14 should not use any cell phones. Because at this stage of development, where the organs of both boys and girls are still developing, using cell phones can use massive pathological damage. These recommendations should actually be made public by all the responsible authorities.
We now come to a very important question. Can the biological effects deriving from mobile radiation also cause cancer? On June 1st, 2011, the World Health Organization announced that the International Agency for Research on Cancer, IARC, had classified radiofrequency electromagnetic fields as a cause for cancer in Category 2B on the list of carcinogens. This was the conclusion of 31 experts from 14 different countries, analyzing nearly every available scientific evidence. This new classification revises the current statement that mobile radiation is only capable of warming up the tissue, and cancer is verifiably considered a non-thermal effect. This new classification puts the danger due to the electromagnetic fields on a level with the dangers of petrol fumes, chloroform, and the herbicide DDT.
Despite this classification, despite the already mentioned studies, like the NIGLA or Salford studies, this threshold still remains untouched, and the possibility that mobile phone radiation causes cancer is still vehemently denied by the operating companies and politicians, for allegedly there was no evidence.
Mr. Weiner, you are a mobile communications electrician and well known due to your many lectures and TV appearances. Can you confirm that in areas nearby cell phone antenna towers the cancer risk is very high?
Yes, the classification by the WHO of mobile communication as possibly cancer-causing is, in my opinion, after many years of experience, extremely understated. Many citizens' initiatives from all over the place confirmed for me that close to transmitter towers, and especially in the main transmitting direction, just there in these neighborhoods, increased cases of cancer develop. All ages are affected, people are dying there. And we can see here in this example, the antenna behind me on the apartment house, the installations are set up to transmit directly into the city centers, the neighborhoods and houses. If you want to look into this deeper, I recommend the well-documented studies from Müllendorf in Austria and the documentary about the cancer village Volturno, Italy. Here you can look deeper into many aspects, but in practice we see it here. It is in every city in the entire world.
Numerous similar reports have reached us, which document a clear correlation between rising numbers of cancer cases and the near proximity to mobile phone transmitter antennas. Central German Broadcasting reports from Steinbach-Hallenburg. The cancer rate there is 8 times higher. In Milstenahe, near Cuxhaven, Germany, more than 30 of 260 residents were diagnosed with various types of cancer. In Great Britain, the operating company O2 had to dismantle a transmission station in the county of Warwickshire following residents' protests after 31 cases of cancer were diagnosed in a single street. Italy. A Radio Vatican study, epidemiologic proof that within a circumference of 6 kilometers around a transmission station, the rate of leukemia in children is 120% higher. Poland, Omega News. Mobile Tower of Death. 55 dead in Sulpsk. Israel, Netanya. 4 times higher rate of cancer near transmitter. Burgerweller, Switzerland. New Zealand, Cherry Study. Causal correlation between tumor cases and the amount of active transmission stations in relation to distance.
Cherry 1999.
On February 19, 2002, the German newspaper Neues Deutschland reported, at a protest rally in Coburg in 2002, the nuclear physicist and deputy federal chairman of the Ecologic Democratic Party, ODP, Dr. Klaus Buchner, said, quote, "The damage to health, such as damage to brain cells and genetic material or blood count changes caused by mobile base stations are well documented," end quote. Referring to the mobile radiation thresholds being too high, Buchner emphasized, quote, "This is murder. People are going to die of this. As a measure to protect life, it is necessary to punish those responsible for their human rights violations," end quote.
Let's summarize the third part of our documentary. High-frequency radiation harms our life to a significant extent. Since this is not caused by thermal stress, only biological processes can be the cause.
In the fourth part of our documentary, let us now approach the next level of argumentation by clarifying whether these damages can be confirmed by case studies from practice.
While we can only show the tip of the iceberg in the course of this documentary, thousands of cases did take place far beyond the currently valid thresholds.
We are going to show you now 2 case reports.
Friedrich Stengel, a farmer in Ottingen, Bavaria. In 1997, a mobile communications antenna was installed next to his farm. Then the odyssey started.
My name is Friedrich Stengel. I'm from Oettingen. I'd like to briefly share with you what we have experienced since the antenna was set up here in 1997. Already in spring of 1998, we noticed that the swallows and many other migrating birds did not return. At that time, we did not know that this radiation is hazardous. Only a year later we discovered it by doing blood counts and analysis, etc. With the cows already that spring and through summer 1998, it was obvious that fertility became worse and worse. Also the health situation got worse. Within 2 years after the antenna was set up, we lost our entire stock of cows, averaging 8 to 9 cows, and 10 calves were stillborn. The story got worse and worse. The cows hardly bore calves anymore. Over and over, cows were dying due to weak immune systems. Until the veterinarian looked out of the window one day and saw the antenna, he said, "We'll do a CBC, a complete blood test." He found out that the lymphocytes were extremely low. Here the blood test, only 21% of the lymphocytes were there. Here I have the tests. He also checked for the stress hormone cortisol. Related to normal levels, only 10 to 12% was still there. Cortisol, stress hormone. Also many other hormones were probably affected. We couldn't have it all checked, that's much too expensive. And that certainly was the reason that the animals don't calve anymore, and if they do, either the calves were stillborn or were premature births, so weak that they died a short time later. The balance until today, more than 30 cows died due to immune system weakness. Every year since then, we have blood tests done. Clear evidence, far more than 100 stillborn, premature, weak calves. All of this with an average stock of 8 to 9 cows. Just in the last 3 months, we again lost 3 cows. The fourth will be this one, lying there. Probably she'll die too soon. Only a pitiful remainder is left. In the meantime, we addressed politicians and the operators, T-Mobile. The result of that? The state veterinary official knocked on our door. He was there, commissioned to find out the cause of the problem. He tried desperately 2 years long, did blood tests, all kind of other tests. He tested for everything, but found nothing. No other virus or anything else. Soil or air pollution. He tested everything, intensively. After 2 years, when he left, he said, "Yes, it can only be radiation related. The blood tests are absolutely evident." He would make sure that antenna had to go. That was about 7 years ago. Until today, we never heard from that man again. He was silenced and does not say anything to the topic anymore. 2 years long he researched, assigned to the case by the Bavarian Environmental Ministry. In the 3rd year I called the office there in Munich. That was during Stoiber's administration. I asked what was happening. And when will the antenna be taken down? The tests were absolutely clear. And then the lady I had on the telephone became aggressive. What did I want again? It's always the same thing always comes out. What did I want now again? I answered, yes, it is clear. As long as the antenna is there, the same thing happens again and again. Then she became even more aggressive. Then she said, save the money I used for postal stamps and telephoning. It's a waste. She said, for us, you're dead. Honestly, I had to hear this. These were her exact words. From that time on, silence, not a word more. The antenna is still there. The problems are still there. They are becoming worse and worse. Now, since they switched to LTE, we've observed the animals are becoming even more aggressive. Infertility is massive, much higher than before. And as I mentioned, their health is getting worse and worse. LTE will finish us off.
Another affected victim of this is Ulrich Weiner, highly electrosensitive. He can no longer live anywhere but in the so-called dead zones in the forests. We visited him.
As a kid, I was interested in mobile communications already at an early age. When I was 18, I started a company from mobile communications technology. I used the technology myself very intensively and never noticed anything. But then it started, trouble concentrating, headaches every time after using my cell phone. At first I just thought, well, just didn't sleep well or have too much stress. But I never connected it to mobile radiation, but then everything escalated, vision problems talking, heart rhythm disturbance, up to the point of total central nervous system breakdown. And then in 2002, after the first breakdown, I had to face the consequences and moved out here in the last dead zone here in Germany, in the middle of the forest. Since then I've been living here, completely free of mobile radiation.
I want to share a couple of cases with you from my practice experience where mobile radiation was the cause. It is not always easy to see the correlations. I had a child here, for example, about 5 years old in kindergarten, known as hyperactive. They couldn't manage it. Then added to this, it started having epileptic seizures. They took it to the University Hospital in Würzburg, where the child was prescribed Ritalin and other medication against epilepsy. The parents did not want this, and they came to me. I did a blood test with the dark field microscope and saw that the blood was totally agglutinated. Although the child itself did not telephone, the parents had 2 cordless phones in the house. That was the cause. I told them they had to choose between child and cordless phone. Thank God they chose the kid. They removed the cordless phones, installed normal phones, and within a short time it got much better. The child is now in school, it is the best in the class and is praised for its good behavior socially. Has never taken any of these medication. I had an 88-year-old patient. Her mind was fit, otherwise healthy. In 2 weeks she was taken to the hospital 3 times due to acutely high blood pressure. Although she had 4 medicines for this from her doctor. We then told her, the cordless phone has to go. Get rid of the cordless phone. She sometimes spent 4 hours a day on that thing. A normal phone was installed in bedroom 1 and now the lady has no more high blood pressure at all. She stopped all 4 medicines and just takes a couple of homeopathic globulin. Her blood pressure is stable, normal already now almost for a year. All kinds of chips and other technology are offered on the market that are supposed to hinder or weaken mobile radiation. My tests prove without a doubt this does not work. I had an architect with me. He had installed all kinds of shielding or screening applications, insulating measures, etc. against radiation on his cell phone. A dark field microscope blood test after telephoning proved there was no protection at all. His blood was totally agglutinated, clumped. Even when somebody tried with special stones, etc., nothing was changed for the better. The clumping of the blood cells remains the same.
We conclude, scientific studies, damages to people, animals, plants, as well as case studies from practice clearly demonstrate that the risks due to the mobile phone transmitter's microwave radiation does not derive from thermal effects, but from biological processes. The legal thresholds are therefore an obvious deception of the public.
Even the mobile network operators can no longer deny these facts. In an official patent application by Swisscom AG regarding the reduction of electrosmog in wireless local networks, Wi-Fi, the mobile network operators openly confess the scam. They acknowledge that the damage inflicted to the human blood cells' genetic material by irradiation with electromagnetic fields is clearly demonstrated, and that there are indications of an increased risk of cancer. So even the mobile network operators confirm the radiation's biological effect.
As the facts cannot be any clearer, we can conclude the argumentation of this documentary. So, if the evidence is so obvious, one more question needs to be asked in the 5th part of our documentary.
Why is there no immediate action to protect the population?
We are here in Kempten in front of the Public Health Department. It was here in 2007 that even investigations by physicians were just ignored. In May 2007, Kempten general practitioners handed over a comparative investigation to the local health authorities. Based on blood counts, this investigation has proven that around local mobile base stations the residents' melatonin and serotonin levels sink significantly. This report was ignored.
In Bavaria, there was a confrontation with a representative of the health authorities. Dr. Hartmann was asked by affected persons why the Public Health Department refuses to conduct such examinations. He stated that by an administrative decree, the Bavarian government prohibited public health officials from acting on reports about health problems related to mobile base stations. It was forbidden by the state government to carry out official medical reports.
But the ignorance goes even further. In 2006, a delegation of doctors handed over a 700-page documentation of radiation-related cases of illnesses to the Federal Office for Radiation Protection. Even to the present day, this has not been pursued and excused with predictable claims.
We are in front of the Public Health Department here in Stuttgart. A local citizens' initiative summarizes the behavior of the authorities as follows. Preventive healthcare becomes organized irresponsibility. The health authorities simply refuse to address the topic. And because a legal ordinance states that you won't get ill below the legal thresholds, you can't get ill. It's just enacted that way. A citizen becoming ill in discordance with this decree doesn't fit the order. He will be labeled a hypochondriac liar or mentally disturbed. This way, you can dispose of reality.
In the background here, you can see the Federal Office for Radiation Protection. The same building also houses the headquarters of the ICNIRP, the private association that engineered the threshold fraud. Does this maybe explain why the Federal Office protects radiation from the people instead of protecting people from radiation? The brochures, The Counterfeiters and From Subtle Falsification to Scientific Crime impressively prove that research papers were deliberately falsified by both the Federal Office for Radiation Protection and the federal government. Furthermore, research projects were impeded, delayed, silenced, or simply ignored. Professor Dr. Franz Adelkover, MD, head of the Reflex study and thus an insider, notices in a similar context. The closest thing to the truth might be the assumption that even the Federal Office for Radiation Protection had its hands bound on instructions from higher levels. The evidence base is clear and allows for only one conclusion. If heaps of evidence are ignored, this can no longer be put aside as some single official's negligence. Rather, this is happening on purpose, on instructions from above.
Here the health of whole nations is knowingly sacrificed. The authors of the cited brochures use the term crime with good reason, because authorities' and politicians' behavior documented is highly criminal. Consequently, our documentary has become a case for the Justice Department. This is why in Part 6, we need to ask the question,
into which criminal hands has the government fallen?
In this part, we would like to take a closer look at the influence of lobby groups. We'll start with the influence on politicians.
Former German Federal Minister of Health Horst Seehofer confirmed the extreme pressure from lobby groups on politicians in a ZDF television station broadcast, Frontal 21, on June 6, 2006. His statement about politicians backing down when facing certain decisions was as follows. That's just how it is. For 30 years up until this day, meaningful, structural changes, also in the sense of a more socialized economy in German healthcare, is not possible because of opposition by lobby groups. Outraged indignation amongst the reporters who raised the question, how is it possible that the lobby groups have more power than the government? Seehofer retorted, I can only tell you that this is how it is. This is how it works, and it works very effectively. In another interview on the 20th of May 2010 with the German TV channel ARD, Seehofer confirmed this statement with different words. Those who decide are not elected, and those who are elected have nothing to decide.
Klagemauer TV. We don't need transparent citizens. We need transparent media, politicians, and high finance.
Mobile communications and pharmaceutical industry lobby groups make the decisions. The health of the population is sacrificed on the altar of greed for profit. With regard to this, here another excerpt from the brochure, The Counterfeiters. Considering these facts, you have to realize the question of health hazards caused by the new communication technologies is not a scientific debate, but a contrast between the economic interests of an industrial sector and the state on the one hand, and the health interests of the population on the other hand.
Now we'll look into how lobby associations influence and exert pressure on science.
Professor Erich Schröndorff was a public prosecutor in the wood preserving agent court case. As an insider, he says, numerous experts simply falsely assess. They are not wrong, they are lying. And they lie with calculus, always in favor of the economically more powerful, the company, the corporation, the manufacturer, involved in the process, but never to the benefit of the sick plaintiff. What the experts do is not a friendship service, but it's part of a business, falsehood for cash. For this, the companies get their wish, favorable expertise, and they get it, otherwise the business relationship would be endangered.
A second example, Professor Peter Zem was doing research work for Telekom for many years. In an interview with the newspaper Schwäbische Zeitung, Professor Zem makes clear, quote, "It is assured that in addition to the heating, as in a microwave oven, there are also other biological effects of pulsed electromagnetic radiation, like those that cellular phones emit," end quote. Telekom forbid Professor Zem to publish these undesirable results.
Professor Zem's investigations led to the following conclusions. Telekom knows from its own tests that health disorders appear far underneath the valid thresholds, but publicly states that the limits are safe.
In plain language, this means the mobile operators knowingly cause damage to the health and life of the population in pursuit of profit. This is intentional bodily injury and thus crime in the highest possible degree.
The journal Natural Physician, December 2007 edition, also reported scientists who have researched on behalf of the industry and published alarming results have been defamed, threatened, and dismissed.
The authors of the brochure The Counterfeiters summarize, more than half of the mobile communications research is paid by the mobile communications industry, and they are looking for people they trust. However, anyone who believes that the state provides sufficient control and promotion of independent scientists, as it would be required to do, deceives himself. Via Telekom, the state itself is a mobile communications entrepreneur. It has sold itself and the health of the population for 50 billion UMTS licensing fees, has made the construction legislation, quote, less bureaucratic, end quote, has eased the safety tests, and forced its authorities into line. Free path for the proliferation of mobile communications antennas.
We move on now to the influence exerted by the lobby on the media. Most of the major scientific newspapers and the big media publish almost only reports that give the impression that all is fine.
Mark Lutz, an advertising film student, tested it out for himself and wrote an exposé for a documentary on radiation damage caused by mobile communications. He offered the story to leading TV stations and well-known magazines. Hear the reaction of a well-known TV station.
You'd like to offer us a film about radiation damage by mobile communications? Great topic. But have you also considered who pays the commercials at our station?
There is censorship in the media. Important information is deliberately withheld from the public in pursuit of profit. This too is criminal behavior.
Now that we have determined that the lobby controls both science, media, and even politics, we are moving on to part 7 and ask the question, are there any deeper hidden backgrounds here? Who controls or who actually monitors the lobby? Did you know, for example, that our modern mobile communication network is also a gigantic monitoring network? Why do I need to register my ID number for each mobile phone purchase? From the very start, in every mobile phone, the monitoring option, including bug function, is implemented. This makes it possible to locate any mobile phone user anywhere at any time. Each call can be intercepted and every movement registered. It is a step toward the transparent citizen. When mobile phone reception is completely all-encompassing, it means that every mobile phone user can be located anywhere and at all time. Conclusion: at all times in the history of mankind, it was the intention of the powerful and the rulers to survey and monitor everything. However, never before has there been such a complete and perfectly disguised surveillance facility as today. George Orwell's famous book, 1984, is no longer a fictional story. It's become reality. Anyone using a mobile phone is automatically caught in the surveillance network.
But in addition to this monitoring network, the mobile communications network can also be abused as a military weapon for mind control. Between 1962 and 1979, the American embassy in Moscow was irradiated with microwaves by the Russian government. Because of this microwave irradiation, 1/3 of the American embassy employees died of cancer. The Soviets knew about the biological effectiveness of this microwave radiation far underneath the legal thresholds. Although the Americans protested against the radiation, the Soviets were able to continue with the argument that the irradiation was 10,000 times lower than the threshold for mobile radiation.
Scientist Tim Riffat did research work on these microwave weapons. He found out that the Soviets used the frequencies of our mobile communications network, namely 900 Hz and 800 Hz. These are precisely the frequencies of our current D network and E+ network. The following quote is also from him. It is a rule of the Secret Service to hide something in the open, encouraging the population to accept microwave mind control weapons that affect their behavior under the cover of a mobile phone. This was a stroke of genius. It is a devilish genius that people also pay for these mind control devices so that damage can be caused to their brain and their behavior, thus making them more easily controllable and submissive.
We summarize. We have shown that the valid thresholds for pulsed electromagnetic mobile phone radiation is an obvious deception of the people.
The radiation thresholds do not protect us, they deceive us. The demonstrated damages to humans, animals, and plants prove that this technology is directed against life and therefore has to be rejected until a safe alternative has been found. The forced radiation of the entire population was legalized by the power of the lobby and is now tolerated by the authorities.
For this reason, a reversal of the burden of proof is necessary. Industry must prove that its products are harmless. The injured party can no longer be responsible to bear the burden of proof. The reasoning of the mobile network operators that damages are not proven can no longer be accepted. In the end, this argumentation is only the proof that the operators are not at all concerned with the health of the population, but are driven only by unscrupulous economic interests. Otherwise, they would turn off the transmitter system as a precaution, even in the case of only a possibility, until it has been completely clarified that they are harmless. What can we do? Klaus Weber, author of the brochure Mobile Communications, The Concealed Danger, has done something. He is now with us in the studio.
Mr. Weber, what made you decide to write this information brochure?
The extent of the damage caused by this technology shocked me deeply. Almost every citizen is affected. Most people are not even aware of the danger. Here, I simply had to act. I reduced my professional work by 50% and researched for months in order to write this brochure. This crime has to be brought to light for the public.
What do you think we can do concretely against this forced radiation? Should our priority be disclosing the fraud of the mobile communications lobby?
Certainly, working to inform people is the first step in bringing the hidden dangers of mobile communications to light. But every coin has two sides. We cannot accuse or expose the mobile communications lobby on one hand, and on the other hand not even be willing to make a small sacrifice, namely to put away our cell phones. The ramification is that we are financing the mobile communications lobby ourselves. Ulrich Weiner gets to the heart of it. In one of his lectures he said, this technique is an attack on the family. It is an attack on our lives. There's only one way to counter this. That is absolutely consistently rejecting it. There is no other way.
In the brochure, you write in addition to this about passive phoning.
Yes. Passive phoning is far more dangerous than passive smoking because it causes blood clumping. Every cell phone user increases the enormous overall problem with his behavior. Mobile phoning is no private matter, as you do not only harm yourself, but also your surroundings. We have to be aware that our mobile call contributes to an increasing radiation intensity of the base stations, affecting the people that live in direct proximity. They get higher radiation. The more we use cell phones, the more antenna towers have to be built. Mobile phone networks and health protection are absolutely incompatible.
Klaus Weber, thanks a lot for this interview.
This concludes our documentary, through which our purpose was to provide you with life-saving information.
But this documentary is also addressed to the operators of these networks who stubbornly deny the facts, to so-called scientists who cover up the facts, to politicians who ignore, and to the media who remain silent to the facts. Every one of you will be held accountable for his irresponsible actions, because the light will uncover the injustice.
Dear viewers, we thank you for your interest. In expectation of having brought to light the silenced danger of mobile communications with this film, and that you can now help to break this dangerous silence, we say goodbye.